I walked out of work and my car was gone. I thought it was stolen. I called my parents panicking. My mom laughed and said, "We gave it to your brother. You're stronger. You'll manage." I hung up and dialed 911. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now let's dive into today's story. The grease from the fryer clung to everything. Mara Collins could smell it in her hair, taste it at the back of her throat, feel it coating her skin like a second layer she couldn't scrub off no matter how hard she tried. She'd worked the evening shift at Maggie's Diner for 3 years now, and the smell had become part of her, woven into the fabric of her uniform and the threads of her life. It was 10:27 p.m. when she finally untied her apron. The diner was empty except for Bill, the night cook, who was already hosing down the kitchen with the kind of tired efficiency that came from doing the same thing every night for 20 years. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a harsh white glow that made the red vinyl booths look faded and worn. Mara folded her apron and stuffed it into her locker, then pulled out her jacket, a thin windbreaker that wouldn't do much against the November cold, but was all she had. Her feet ached. Her lower back throbbed from hours of standing, carrying trays, refilling coffee cups for truckers and late-night regulars who tipped in quarters. She'd smiled through all of it the way she always did, because smiling meant better tips, and better tips meant she was one step closer to finishing her associate degree at the community college. One step closer to getting out. "Night, Mara," Bill called from the kitchen. "Night," she said, her voice hoarse. She clocked out at 10:31 p.m., her time card stamping the numbers in red ink. Another shift down. Another $43 before taxes. She'd have to pick up an extra shift this week if she wanted to make rent and still have enough left over for gas and the payment plan she was on for her textbooks. The back door of the diner opened onto a small parking lot, cracked asphalt with weeds pushing through the gaps. Security light cast long shadows across the spaces, most of them empty now except for Bill's truck and what should have been her car. Mara stepped outside, and the cold hit her immediately, cutting through her thin jacket. She pulled it tighter and walked toward her usual spot, third row from the building, right under the light because she'd learned early on that parking in the dark was asking for trouble. Her spot was empty. She stopped walking. For a moment, her tired brain couldn't process what she was seeing. She looked at the space, then at the building, then back at the space, trying to orient herself. Maybe she'd parked somewhere else tonight. Maybe she'd been so exhausted she'd forgotten and left it in a different row. But no, she always parked in the same spot. Routine was safety. Routine was control. Mara walked faster now, checking the other rows, her breath coming out in white puffs in the cold air. She checked the entire lot twice, her heart starting to pound harder with each empty space she confirmed wasn't hers. Her car was gone. Not towed. There were no signs posted about towing, and besides, she'd been parked legally. Not stolen, surely. Who would steal a 2008 Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door and a broken radio? It wasn't worth stealing. It was barely worth driving. But it was hers. She'd bought it with her own money 3 years ago. Saved up from this job and the one before it, paid it off last spring. It was registered in her name, titled in her name, insured under her policy. It was ugly and old, and the heater only worked on the highest setting, but it was freedom. It got her to work. It got her to night classes. It got her to the library on her days off, where she could sit in silence and study without her mother asking her to do something, fix something, handle something. It was the one place in her life where she could be completely alone. Mara pulled her phone from her pocket with shaking hands. The screen was cracked, had been for months, but it still worked. She scrolled to her mother's number and pressed call before she could second-guess herself. It rang once, twice, 3 times. "Hello." Denise Collins answered on the 4th ring, her voice casual, light, the way she always sounded when she thought she'd gotten away with something. "Mom." Mara said, trying to keep her voice steady. Where's my car? There was a pause. Not long, just a beat, but Mara heard it. Heard the calculation happening on the other end of the line. Oh, Denise said, and Mara could practically see her waving her hand dismissively. I thought you'd have noticed by now. Noticed what? Mara's grip tightened on the phone. We let Trevor take it. He needs it more than you do. You're stronger. You'll manage. The words hung in the cold night air. Mara stood completely still. Phone pressed against her ear so hard it hurt. A semi-truck rumbled past on the highway nearby, its engine roaring into the distance. The security light above her flickered once, twice, then steadied. You took my car, she said slowly, each word separate and distinct. Don't be dramatic, Mara. Denise's voice had shifted now, taking on that edge of impatience she always got when someone questioned her. Trevor's truck broke down, and he needs to get to work. You can take the bus. You always figure things out. That's my car. It's registered in my name. You had no right. I have every right. I'm your mother, and Trevor is your brother. Family helps family. Or did you forget that? Mara's jaw clenched. She'd heard this speech before. Family helps family. Family sacrifices. Family puts others first. Always others. Never her. When do I get it back? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Denise sighed, the sound crackling through the phone line. We'll figure it out. Just give him a few days to sort out his truck situation. He's trying to get his life together, Mara. You should be supportive. I work 6 days a week. I have class tomorrow night. How am I supposed to get there? You'll figure it out. You always do. Denise's tone was final now, dismissive. I have to go. Your father wants dinner reheated. Mom. The line went dead. Mara stood in the empty parking lot, staring at her phone screen. Her reflection stared back at her in the black glass, distorted and small. She stood there for a long moment, the cold seeping through her jacket, through her skin into her bones. Around her, the night was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and the buzz of the security light overhead. Then she opened her phone again and dialed. 911, what's your emergency? Mara's voice came out steady, calmer than she felt. I need to report a stolen vehicle. The officer who arrived 20 minutes later was in his 40s, with the kind of face that had seen enough to not be surprised by anything anymore. His name tag read Officer Patterson. He pulled up in his cruiser, lights off, and stepped out with a notepad in hand. You called about a stolen vehicle? He asked, approaching Mara where she stood near the empty parking space. Yes, sir. Mara pulled her registration from her wallet. She always kept it with her, along with her insurance card and license. It's a 2008 Honda Civic. Gray. License plate NEB 4721. Officer Patterson took the documents and examined them under his flashlight. This is registered to you? Yes, sir. I bought it 3 years ago. Paid it off last spring. And when did you notice it was missing? About 30 minutes ago. I got off work at 10:30. Mara gestured toward the diner behind them. I parked here when I came in at 2 this afternoon. When I came out, it was gone. Did you see anyone suspicious around the vehicle today? Any signs of forced entry when you left it? Mara hesitated. This was the moment, the point where she either told the truth or protected them, the way she always had. I know who took it, she said quietly. Officer Patterson looked up from his notepad. You know who took your vehicle? Yes. Mara met his eyes. My brother. My mother gave him the keys. The officer's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. He'd heard this story before. Maybe not this exact version, but close enough. Your mother gave your brother the keys to your car, he repeated, making sure he had it right. Yes. She just told me on the phone. She said Trevor needed it more than I do and that I'd manage without it. Did you give your brother permission to take the vehicle? No. Did you give your mother permission to give him the keys? No. Officer Patterson nodded slowly, writing in his notepad. Do you know where your brother might have taken the vehicle? Probably to his apartment, or out with his friends. I don't know. Mara's hands were shaking now, but not from the cold. He lives at the Riverside Apartments on 3rd Street, Building B, Unit 12. And your mother, does she live with you? No, I live alone. She lives with my father about 2 miles from here. How did she get the keys to your vehicle? That was the question Mara had been asking herself for the past 30 minutes. She tried to remember. Had she left them somewhere? Had they taken them from her purse? Then it clicked. I left my spare keys at their house a few months ago, in case of emergency. I didn't think. She stopped, her throat tight. Of course, she hadn't thought they'd steal her car. What kind of person thought that about their own family? Officer Patterson finished writing and looked at her. His eyes were kind, which somehow made this worse. Ma'am, I need to ask you directly. Do you want to press charges against your brother for unauthorized use of your vehicle? This was it. The line. Once she crossed it, there was no going back. Family helps family. Family forgives. Family protects each other, even when they don't deserve it. Mara thought about the bus schedule she'd have to memorize now. The hour-long commute to campus instead of the 15-minute drive. The shifts she'd have to miss because she couldn't get there. The classes she'd have to drop because she couldn't make it on time. The slow erosion of everything she'd been working toward because Trevor needed something and Mara would manage. She always managed. Until now. Yes, Mara said, her voice clear and steady. I want to press charges. My family doesn't get a special pass. Officer Patterson nodded, no judgment in his expression. All right, I'll need you to fill out a stolen vehicle report. We'll put out a notice, and if we locate the vehicle, we'll make contact with whoever's driving it. He handed her a clipboard with forms attached. Mara filled them out right there under the security light, her handwriting neat despite her shaking hands. Name, address, vehicle description, last known location, probable location of vehicle, known suspect. She wrote Trevor's full name. Trevor James Collins, 24 years old, her younger brother by 3 years. When she finished, Officer Patterson took the clipboard and reviewed the forms. This looks good. We'll be in touch. Do you have somewhere to stay tonight? I live about 2 miles from here. Do you have a way to get home? Mara almost laughed. I'll walk. I'll manage. If Officer Patterson caught the bitterness in her voice, he didn't show it. All right. You should hear from us within 24 hours. We'll call if we locate the vehicle. Thank you, Mara said. She watched him drive away, his taillights disappearing into the darkness. Then she started walking. The streets of Kearney were quiet at this hour. Most people were home, settled in for the night. Mara passed darkened houses with porch lights glowing, cars parked in driveways, the occasional flicker of television screens visible through curtains. Normal lives. Families that didn't steal from each other. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. 3 text messages from her mother. How dare you? You know Trevor needs that car. What is wrong with you? Mara deleted them without responding and kept walking. By the time she reached her apartment, a small 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor of an old complex, her feet were numb and her face was frozen from the cold. She climbed the stairs slowly, her whole body aching, and let herself in. The apartment was dark and cold. She'd turned the heat down before leaving for work to save money. She turned it back up now and collapsed onto her second-hand couch without taking off her shoes. Her phone buzzed again. More messages from her mother. Then one from Trevor. WTF, Mara? Mom said you're freaking out over the car. Chill. I'll bring it back in a few days. She stared at the message for a long time. Then she set her phone down, pulled a blanket over herself, and closed her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she slept through the night. Trevor Collins was pulled over at 11:47 p.m. on Highway 44, about 10 miles outside of Kearney. He'd been driving fast, music blasting from the car's crappy speakers. Some rap song about money and women and success. The kind of success Trevor was always talking about, but never working toward. His friends were in the car with him, 2 guys from his construction crew, and they were all laughing about something when the red and blue lights appeared in the rearview mirror. "Shit," Trevor muttered, turning down the music. Probably a busted taillight or something. He pulled over onto the shoulder, cocky and unconcerned. He'd been pulled over before. You talked your way out of it. Smiled. Made excuses. Cops usually didn't care enough to push it. The officer who approached his window was young, maybe early 30s, with a methodical way of moving that suggested he took his job seriously. His name tag read Officer Reeves. "License and registration," Officer Reeves said. Trevor reached for his wallet, still relaxed. "What did I do, officer?" "You were going 72 in a 55 zone." "Oh, come on. Everyone speeds on this road." "License and registration," Officer Reeves repeated. Trevor handed over his license, then reached for the glove compartment. He fumbled around inside, looking for the registration. His friends in the back seat had gone quiet now, the way people do when they realize this might not be as simple as they thought. "This your vehicle?" Officer Reeves asked, examining Trevor's license. "Yeah," Trevor said automatically. Then, well, kind of. "It's my sister's, but she let me borrow it." Officer Reeves' expression didn't change. "Step out of the vehicle, please." "What? Why?" "Step out of the vehicle." Something in the officer's tone made Trevor's stomach drop. He opened the door and stepped out onto the shoulder, gravel crunching under his boots. Behind him, his friends stayed in the car, silent now. "This vehicle was reported stolen approximately 2 hours ago," Officer Reeves said calmly. Trevor's mouth went dry. "What? No, that's a mistake. My mom gave me the keys. My sister knows I have it. Do you have written permission from the vehicle's registered owner to operate this vehicle?" "It's my sister. I don't need permission. We're family." "That's not how the law works." Officer Reeves pulled out his handcuffs. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back." "Whoa, wait." Trevor's voice had gone from cocky to panicked in the space of seconds. "This is insane. My sister won't press charges. She's just mad. She'll cool down." "Turn around and put your hands behind your back," Officer Reeves repeated. "She's my sister. She wouldn't do this. Call her, and she'll tell you it's fine." But Officer Reeves had heard this story before too. He'd heard 100 versions of it. Family member takes something they have no right to take, assumes the owner won't do anything about it because family gives you a pass. Sometimes they're right. Usually they're right. Sometimes they're not. The handcuffs clicked into place. Trevor's friends got out of the car, hands up, identifying themselves, explaining they didn't know it was stolen. Officer Reeves called for backup to transport them and give them rides home. Trevor was put in the back of the cruiser, still talking, still insisting this was all a big misunderstanding. "My sister won't go through with this," he said as the car pulled away from the shoulder. "She always caves. She'll feel guilty and drop the charges. You'll see." Officer Reeves glanced at him in the rearview mirror but didn't respond. He'd heard that story before too. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes the person who was stolen from finally got tired of being stolen from. Sometimes they didn't cave. Mara woke to her phone ringing at 6 a.m. She'd been dreaming about the parking lot, about searching for her car in endless rows of empty spaces, the security light flickering overhead like a strobe. The ringtone pulled her out of it, harsh and jarring. She grabbed her phone off the coffee table without looking at the screen. "Hello. How could you?" Denise's voice was shrill, hysterical in a way Mara had only heard a handful of times before. "How could you do this to your brother?" Mara sat up slowly, the blanket falling away. Her body ached from sleeping on the couch. Mom. He was arrested. Arrested, Mara. Do you understand what you've done? He stole my car. He did not steal anything. I gave him permission. It's not your car to give permission for. Mara's voice was steady, each word deliberate. It's mine. It's registered in my name. You had no right. I have every right. I'm your mother. Denise was screaming now, loud enough that Mara had to hold the phone away from her ear. You ungrateful, selfish. Mara hung up. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding. But she'd done it. The phone rang again immediately. Denise. Mara declined the call. It rang again. Declined. Again. Declined. Then the text started coming in rapid-fire succession. Answer your phone. You are tearing this family apart. Trevor is your brother. How can you live with yourself? Everyone will know what kind of person you really are. You're dead to me. Mara turned her phone on silent and set it face down on the table. She stood up slowly, her whole body stiff, and walked to the bathroom. Her reflection in the mirror looked tired. Dark circles under her eyes, grease still in her hair from work, her uniform wrinkled from sleeping in it. She looked like someone who'd been worn down to nothing over years of small compromises, small sacrifices, small pieces of herself given away until there was barely anything left. But this morning, something was different. This morning, she'd finally said no. She showered, the hot water running longer than she could really afford, but needing it anyway. She scrubbed the grease from her hair, the smell of the diner from her skin, and when she got out, she felt lighter somehow. Cleaner. Her phone was vibrating constantly on the table when she came out. 17 missed calls, 32 text messages, all from family. Mara got dressed, jeans, a sweater, her only pair of boots, and sat down to read them. Her mother's messages were alternating between fury and manipulation. Screaming 1 minute, guilt-tripping the next. You've ruined Trevor's life. He has a record now. What kind of sister are you? I raised you better than this. Your father is so disappointed. Trevor's messages started around 5:30, probably right after he was released. I can't believe you actually did this. Do you know what you've cost me? Mom is crying because of you. I'll lose my job if this goes on my record. I hate you. Then her father chimed in, his message brief and cold. You've embarrassed this family. Don't come to the house. Mara read through all of them, her expression blank. Then she deleted every single one and blocked their numbers. Not forever, maybe, but for now. For now, she needed silence. The call from Officer Patterson came at 9 a.m. Ms. Collins, this is Officer Patterson. I wanted to update you on your case. Mara was at the kitchen table, drinking instant coffee that tasted like burnt paper. Yes. We located your vehicle last night and made an arrest. Your brother is being charged with unauthorized use of a vehicle. He was released on bond this morning, but there will be a court hearing to determine how to proceed. When? Likely within the next few weeks. You'll be notified of the date. The vehicle is being held as evidence for now, but you should be able to retrieve it after the initial hearing. How long will that take? Hard to say. Could be a week, could be a month. Depends on the court schedule and whether your brother pleads guilty or fights the charge. Mara closed her eyes. A week she could manage. A month would mean missing work, missing classes, appending her entire life while Trevor got to drive around in her car until the justice system caught up with him. Is there any way to get it back sooner? She asked. Not while it's evidence, I'm afraid. I'm sorry. It's fine. Thank you for calling. Ms. Collins, Officer Patterson said, his voice gentle. I work a lot of these cases, family cases, and I want you to know you did the right thing. It might not feel like it right now, but you did. Mara swallowed hard. Thank you. After she hung up, she sat at the table for a long time, staring at nothing. Then she opened her laptop and searched for the bus schedule. The next 2 weeks were the hardest of Mara's life. The bus added an hour and a half to her daily commute. She had to wake up at 5 a.m. to make it to her morning class by 8, then take another bus to the diner for her afternoon shift, then another bus home that didn't run past 9:30, which meant she had to leave work early and lose hours she couldn't afford to lose. Her tips dropped. Her grades slipped. Her body ached from standing at bus stops in the cold, from carrying groceries home on foot, from the constant exhaustion of doing everything the hard way. But she didn't call her mother. She didn't apologize. She didn't back down. Denise called from different numbers, friends' phones, relatives' phones, even the landline at the house that Mara had forgotten existed. Each time the message was the same. Mara was selfish. Mara was cruel. Mara was tearing the family apart. One call came from her Aunt Rachel, Denise's older sister. "Mara, honey, your mother is beside herself," Rachel said, her voice thick with concern. "Can't you just drop the charges? Trevor made a mistake. He's young. He'll learn." "He's 24, Mara said flatly, "and he's made this same mistake a dozen times. Someone else always fixes it for him. But he's family. So am I." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Your mother just wants what's best for you," Rachel tried again. "No," Mara said quietly. "She wants what's easiest for her. There's a difference." She hung up and added Rachel to her blocked list. The messages kept coming, though. From cousins she hadn't spoken to in years. From family friends who barely knew her. All of them had heard Denise's version of the story, Mara the ungrateful daughter, Trevor the victim of his sister's cruelty. None of them asked for Mara's side. At work, the other servers started looking at her differently. Small town meant small gossip, and word had gotten around that Mara Collins had her own brother arrested. Some people gave her sympathetic looks. Others avoided her entirely. Maggie, the owner of the diner, pulled her aside one afternoon during her break. "You doing okay, hon?" she asked, her round face creased with worry. Mara nodded, too tired to lie convincingly. "I'm fine. I heard about the car situation. That's rough. I'll manage." Maggie studied her for a long moment. "You know, I raised 3 boys, and I can tell you right now, sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them face consequences. Keeps them from turning into the kind of adult who thinks they're entitled to whatever they want." Mara felt something loosen in her chest. "Thank you. You need extra shifts to make up for the bus trouble. You just let me know. And if you need a ride home some nights, I can drop you off. It's not far out of my way." Mara's eyes stung. "I appreciate that. Family should lift you up, not drag you down," Maggie said firmly. "Remember that." The court hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks after Trevor's arrest. Mara got the notice in the mail on a Tuesday. She'd be required to appear as the complainant. Trevor would be there. Probably her mother, too. The night before the hearing, Mara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind running through 100 different scenarios. What if Trevor had a good lawyer? What if the judge thought she was being petty? What if her whole family showed up and made a scene? What if she was wrong? The doubt crept in slowly the way it always did. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe this was just how families worked. Messy and complicated and imperfect. Maybe she should have just let it go, found another way to get to work, avoided this whole nightmare. But then she thought about the parking lot, the empty space where her car should have been, the casual way her mother had said, "You'll manage." She thought about every time she'd been asked to sacrifice for Trevor, every time she'd been told she was stronger, more capable, more responsible, every time she'd been made to feel guilty for wanting something for herself. By the time the sun came up, Mara's resolve had hardened again. She got dressed in the only professional outfit she owned, black slacks and a white button-down she'd bought for job interviews, and took the bus to the courthouse. The courtroom was smaller than she expected. Fluorescent lights, worn wooden benches, a judge's bench at the front with the state seal hanging behind it. It smelled like old paper and floor cleaner. Mara sat in the front row, her hands folded in her lap. Trevor sat on the opposite side with a public defender, a young woman in a wrinkled suit who looked like she was handling 20 cases at once. He was wearing a button-down shirt that was too big for him, probably borrowed, and his hair was combed back in a way that made him look younger than he was. He glanced at Mara once when he came in. Just once. His expression was a mix of anger and disbelief, like he still couldn't comprehend that she'd actually gone through with this. Denise sat 2 rows behind Trevor, flanked by Mara's father and Aunt Rachel. All of them stared straight ahead, refusing to look at Mara. The hearing was quick and procedural. The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and no nonsense in her expression, reviewed the case file and called Trevor forward. "Mr. Collins, you're charged with unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. How do you plead?" Trevor's lawyer leaned in and whispered something to him. He straightened. "Not guilty, Your Honor." The judge looked at him over her reading glasses. "You're claiming you had permission from the vehicle's owner to operate it?" "Yes, Your Honor. My mother gave me the keys." "Is your mother the registered owner of the vehicle?" Trevor hesitated. "No, Your Honor. My sister is." "Did you have permission from your sister to operate the vehicle?" Another hesitation. Longer this time. "Aye, she usually lets me borrow it. I thought it would be fine." "That's not what I asked. Did you have explicit permission from the registered owner?" Trevor's jaw tightened. Mara watched him struggle with the answer, watched him try to find a way to twist the truth into something that would get him off the hook. Finally, quietly, he said, "No, Your Honor." The courtroom was silent. The judge made a note on her papers. "Given that you've admitted to operating a vehicle without the owner's permission, I'm prepared to offer you a plea arrangement. Guilty plea to the charge, 6 months probation, restitution for any damages, and 50 hours of community service. If you complete the terms successfully, the charge can potentially be reduced on your record." Trevor's lawyer whispered to him again. He looked back at Denise, who was shaking her head vigorously, her face red. "I'd like to request a continuance, Your Honor," the lawyer said, "to give my client time to consider his options." The judge sighed. "Fine. We'll reconvene in 30 days. Mr. Collins, I suggest you use that time wisely. And I suggest you stay away from vehicles that don't belong to you." "Yes, Your Honor." Court is adjourned. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. Mara stood up, her legs shaky. She'd been prepared for this to be over today, one way or another. Now it would drag on for another month. Another month without her car. Another month of bus schedules and frozen mornings and lost wages. She turned to leave and found herself face to face with Denise. Her mother's eyes were red-rimmed and furious. "Satisfied," she hissed. "I just want my car back," Mara said quietly. "This isn't about the car. This is about you punishing your brother because you're jealous." "Jealous of what?" "Of the fact that he has a life, that people actually like him, that he doesn't spend every waking moment being bitter and cold and—" "That's enough," Mara's father said, his hand on Denise's arm. He looked at Mara with something that might have been disappointment or might have been shame. "Let's go." They walked past her without another word. Aunt Rachel gave Mara one last look, sad, pitying, and followed them out. Trevor stayed behind, his lawyer gathering papers. He stood near the bench, his hands in his pockets, and for a moment Mara thought he might actually apologize. Instead, he said, "Mom's right, you know. You're going to regret this." Then he left too. Mara stood alone in the empty courtroom, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. But she didn't cry. She walked out into the cold November morning, pulled her thin jacket tight, and waited for the bus to take her to work. That night, Mara couldn't stop thinking about Denise's accusations. Jealous, bitter, cold. Was that what her mother really thought of her? Or was it just easier to believe that than to admit she'd raised one son to take and one daughter to give until there was nothing left? Mara sat at her tiny kitchen table, a box of old papers in front of her. Tax documents, utility bills, credit card statements she'd requested from the companies after realizing something was wrong with her credit score. She'd been ignoring the problem for months, telling herself it was probably just a mistake, something that would sort itself out. But now, with everything else falling apart, she needed to know. The first statement showed a credit card opened in her name 4 years ago. She'd never applied for it, never received it, never used it. The billing address was her parents' house. Mara's stomach tightened. She went through more papers. Another credit card opened 3 years ago. Same address. Late fees accumulating. Interest piling up. A utility bill for an apartment she'd never lived in. A medical bill for a procedure she'd never had. All in her name. All sent to her parents' address. Mara sat back in her chair, her mind reeling. Denise had stolen her identity. Not just once. Multiple times over several years. Opening accounts, running up debt, letting it go to collections, all while Mara was working herself to exhaustion trying to save money and build a life. The estimated total was over $8,000. Mara's hands were shaking so hard she had to set the papers down. $8,000 of debt she didn't know, destroying her credit, making it impossible for her to get approved for loans, for apartments, for anything. And Denise had done it without a second thought. Mara pulled out her laptop and started searching. How to report identity theft. What to do when a family member steals your identity. How to file a police report for fraud. The websites all said the same thing. File a report with the Federal Trade Commission. Freeze your credit. Dispute the fraudulent accounts. File a police report. That last one gave her pause. Filing a police report meant involving law enforcement. It meant potentially pressing charges against her mother. Mara thought about the courtroom that morning, about Denise's red-rimmed eyes and furious expression, about Trevor's smug certainty that Mara would cave. She thought about $8,000 of debt she'd be responsible for if she didn't report it. She opened a new tab and searched for the non-emergency police line. Officer Patterson arrived at her apartment 2 hours later. He looked tired, like he'd been working a long shift, but his expression was patient as he sat down at her kitchen table and listened to her explain. "I need to report identity theft," Mara said, "against my mother." She laid out all the documents, the credit cards, the utility bills, the medical charges, everything with her name on it that she'd never authorized. Officer Patterson went through each one carefully, making notes. "Have you contacted the credit card companies?" "Not yet. I wanted to file a report first." "Smart. You'll need the report number to dispute the charges." He paused, his pen hovering over his notepad. "Ms. Collins, I have to ask, are you certain you want to pursue this? Fraud charges against a family member are complicated. They can have serious consequences." "I know. Your mother could face criminal charges, fines, possibly jail time, depending on the amount." "I know," Mara repeated, her voice steady. Officer Patterson studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded and continued writing. When he finished, he handed her a copy of the report. "You'll need to file an identity theft affidavit with the FTC. I'd also recommend freezing your credit with all 3 bureaus, so no one can open new accounts in your name." "I'll do that. And Ms. Collins—" He stood up, gathering his papers. "For what it's worth, you're doing the right thing. I know it doesn't feel like it, but you are." After he left, Mara sat at the table with the report in front of her. Doing the right thing. It was supposed to feel good, wasn't it? Standing up for yourself. Refusing to be a victim. Taking control. Instead, it just felt lonely. But maybe that was the cost of freedom. The investigation took 3 weeks. During that time, Mara heard nothing from her family. No calls from blocked numbers. No messages relayed through relatives. Just silence, cold and complete. At first, it was a relief. No more guilt trips. No more manipulation. No more being told she was tearing the family apart for wanting basic respect. But the silence also felt like proof of something she'd always suspected. Her family only wanted her around when she was useful. When she was the one solving problems, making sacrifices, managing everyone else's chaos. Now that she'd stopped, she simply didn't exist to them. Mara threw herself into work and school. She picked up extra shifts at the diner, even though the bus schedule made it nearly impossible. She stayed late at the library after class, studying in the warm silence while the snow fell outside. She avoided social media, avoided places where she might run into family, avoided thinking too hard about what she'd set in motion. But the investigation was moving forward, whether she thought about it or not. The detective assigned to her case, a woman named Detective Lorraine Hayes, called her on a Tuesday afternoon in early December. "Ms. Collins, I wanted to update you on your identity theft case. We've completed our investigation and found evidence of multiple fraudulent accounts opened in your name over a 4-year period." Mara was at home, curled up on the couch with a cup of tea. "How many accounts?" 7 total. 3 credit cards, 2 utility accounts, 1 medical account, and 1 personal loan. The total fraudulent amount is approximately $9,400. Mara closed her eyes, even worse than she'd thought. "We've also discovered that the pattern of activity suggests this wasn't opportunistic. The accounts were opened systematically, using your personal information, including your social security number. The billing address was consistently your mother's residence." "What does that mean?" "It means we have enough evidence to pursue charges. Identity theft, fraud, potentially forgery if she signed documents in your name." Mara's grip tightened on her tea mug. "What happens now?" "The prosecutor will review the case and decide whether to file formal charges. Given the amount and the duration of the fraud, it's likely they will. You'll be notified if charges are filed and may be asked to testify." "How long will that take?" "Could be a few weeks. Could be a couple months. These things move slowly." After they hung up, Mara sat in the quiet of her apartment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. $9,000 for years of theft. And Denise had done it without hesitation, without guilt, probably without even thinking it was wrong. Because Mara was strong. Mara would manage. Trevor's court date came before the fraud charges were filed. Mara got the notice in the mail. Another hearing, this time for Trevor's plea or trial. She almost didn't go. The thought of sitting in that courtroom again, facing her family's anger and accusations, made her stomach turn. But she went anyway. This time, she wore jeans and her work uniform. She hadn't had time to go home and change. She'd taken the bus straight from the diner, still smelling like grease and coffee, her feet aching from a double shift. The courtroom was nearly empty. Just Trevor, his lawyer, the prosecutor, and the judge. Denise wasn't there. Mara found that absence more telling than anything else. Her mother, who had screamed and cried and guilt-tripped for weeks, couldn't even show up to support Trevor when it mattered. Or maybe she'd finally realized this wasn't going away. The judge, the same woman from last time, called the case. "Mr. Collins, have you reached a decision regarding the plea offer?" Trevor's lawyer stood. "Yes, Your Honor. My client wishes to accept the plea agreement." Mara felt something settle in her chest. He'd caved. Finally. "Mr. Collins, please stand." The judge waited while Trevor stood, his posture slouched, defeated. "You're pleading guilty to unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. Do you understand the terms of your plea agreement?" "Yes, Your Honor." 6 months probation, 50 hours community service, and restitution for any damages to the vehicle. If you successfully complete these terms, the charge may be reduced to a misdemeanor on your record. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And do you understand that if you violate the terms of your probation, you could face jail time Trevor swallowed hard. Yes, Your Honor. Very well. Plea accepted. The judge made notes on her papers. Ms. Collins, please stand. Mara stood, her heart pounding. The judge looked at her over her glasses. The vehicle in question has been released from evidence. You can retrieve it from the impound lot. The defendant will be responsible for all impound fees as part of his restitution. Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Collins, you're to have no contact with the victim outside of court-ordered restitution. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down. Mara walked out of the courthouse into the cold December air. Snow was falling, light and soft, covering the parking lot in a thin layer of white. She'd gotten her car back. 6 weeks without it. 6 weeks of buses and frozen mornings and lost wages and exhaustion. But she'd gotten it back. And Trevor had a criminal record now. Not a serious one, but enough. Enough that every job application would ask about it. Every background check would show it. Every time he tried to move forward in life, it would be there, a reminder that actions have consequences. Mara walked to the impound lot 3 blocks away and filled out the paperwork to retrieve her car. The fees totaled $400, towing, storage, processing, but Trevor would have to pay them as part of his restitution. When she finally saw her car sitting in the lot, covered in dust and bird droppings, she almost laughed. It was still ugly, still old, still had the broken radio and the dent in the passenger door, but it was hers. She paid the immediate release fee, got behind the wheel, and turned the key. The engine started on the first try. The fraud charges were filed 2 weeks before Christmas. Mara found out through Detective Hayes, who called her on a Friday evening while she was studying for finals. Ms. Collins, I wanted to let you know that the prosecutor has filed charges against your mother. 3 counts of identity theft, 2 counts of fraud, 1 count of forgery. Mara set down her pen, her textbook forgotten. What happens now? She'll be arrested and arraigned. She'll have the option to post bail. Then there will be a preliminary hearing to determine if there's enough evidence to go to trial. Will I have to testify? Potentially, yes, but that won't be for a while. How long? Could be 6 months. Could be a year. These cases move slowly. After the call ended, Mara sat at her kitchen table, staring at her notes without seeing them. Denise would be arrested. The woman who had raised her, fed her, clothed her, who had also stolen from her, manipulated her, used her until there was nothing left, would be arrested. Mara waited for the guilt to come. The doubt, the voice in her head saying she should call it off. Drop the charges, protect her mother the way she'd always protected everyone else. But the guilt didn't come. Instead, she felt something else. Something lighter. Relief. Denise was arrested on a Monday morning. Mara didn't witness it. Didn't want to. But she heard about it anyway. Small-town gossip traveled fast, and by Tuesday afternoon, everyone at the diner was talking about it. Did you hear Denise Collins was arrested? For what? Identity theft. Stole from her own daughter. No. Yes. Opened credit cards in her name. Ran up thousands in debt. That's awful. I always thought there was something off about that family. Mara kept her head down and refilled coffee cups, pretending not to hear. Maggie pulled her aside during her break. You doing okay, hon? I'm fine. That's your mother they're talking about. I know. Maggie studied her for a long moment. You're tougher than you look. I have to be. The call started again after Denise made bail. Different numbers. Blocked numbers. Relatives Mara hadn't spoken to in years. All of them said the same thing in different words. Mara was destroying her mother. Mara was vindictive. Mara was tearing the family apart. One call came from her father. Your mother might go to jail because of you, he said, his voice flat and cold. She might go to jail because she committed fraud, Mara replied. She made a mistake. She made multiple mistakes over 4 years. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. She's your mother, and I'm her daughter. Did that matter when she was stealing my identity? Her father was silent for a long moment. You've changed, he finally said. Yes, Mara agreed. I have. He hung up. Mara added his number to her blocked list and went back to her homework. By January, the fallout had settled into a new normal. Trevor was on probation, doing community service, avoiding Mara as ordered by the court. He'd lost his construction job after his arrest. Too much liability, his boss had said. Now he was working part-time at a gas station, barely making rent. Denise had lost her job at the school cafeteria when the fraud charges became public. The school board had voted unanimously to terminate her employment. She was applying for jobs around town, but word had spread. No one wanted to hire someone arrested for stealing from their own daughter. She'd hired a public defender and was trying to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor wasn't budging. The amount was too high. The duration was too long. The betrayal was too calculated. Denise was looking at potential jail time. Mara heard all of this through the gossip mill, through whispered conversations at the diner, through former friends who still occasionally reached out to tell her she'd gone too far. But Mara had stopped explaining herself. She'd stopped defending her choices to people who would never understand. She'd stopped carrying the weight of her family's dysfunction on her shoulders. She worked. She studied. She paid down the debt that had accumulated during the weeks without her car. She froze her credit and changed all her passwords and locked down her personal information so tightly that even she had trouble accessing it sometimes. And slowly, gradually, she started to rebuild. The final conversation with Denise came in late February. Mara was leaving the library after a long study session when her phone rang from an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello. Mara. Denise's voice was quiet, strained, different from the screaming and accusations of months before. It's me. Mara stopped walking. Snow crunched under her boots. Her breath came out in white clouds. What do you want? Denise's voice cracked. I need you to drop the charges. No. Please. I'll lose everything. You already lost it. The prosecutor said if you ask them to drop the charges, they'll consider it. You're the victim. They'll listen to you. I'm not dropping the charges. Mara, I'm your mother. I did everything for you. I raised you. You stole from me, Mara interrupted, her voice calm and cold. For 4 years. $9,000. You destroyed my credit. You made it impossible for me to get loans or apply for apartments or do anything without carrying your debt. I made a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. Mistakes are accidents. What you did was deliberate. You chose to steal my identity. You chose to open accounts in my name. You chose to do it again and again and again. Denise was crying now. Mara could hear it in her voice, the gasping breaths, the sobs she was trying to swallow. I don't deserve this. I was desperate. We needed the money. Then you should have asked. I couldn't. You could have asked me for help. You could have been honest. You could have treated me like a person instead of a resource to exploit. Mara's voice was still steady, still calm, but there was steel underneath. But you didn't, because you never saw me as a person. You saw me as someone who would manage, someone who would sacrifice, someone who would carry your burdens and never complain. That's not true. Yes, it is. And when I finally said no, when I finally stood up for myself, you called me selfish. You called me cruel. You tried to make me feel guilty for refusing to be stolen from. Mara, please. You taught me to survive, Mara said quietly. You taught me that the world is harsh and people will use you and you have to be strong. That's all I'm doing. That's all I did. I didn't mean. It doesn't matter what you meant. It matters what you did. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Mara could hear Denise breathing, ragged and broken. Finally, Denise spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I did everything for you. No, Mara said. You did everything to me. She hung up. This time, when the phone rang again, she didn't answer. She blocked the number and kept walking. By March, Denise had taken a plea deal. 3 years probation. 100 hours of community service. Full restitution of the $9,000 plus court fees. A felony on her record. No jail time. But the consequences would follow her for the rest of her life. Trevor was finishing his own probation, keeping his head down, staying away from Mara as ordered. The family had fractured completely. Aunts and uncles had chosen sides. Cousins had stopped speaking to each other. Holiday gatherings were awkward. Tense affairs where half the family didn't show up. Mara didn't go to any of them. She spent Christmas alone in her apartment, eating Chinese takeout and watching old movies. She spent New Year's Eve studying for midterms. She spent her birthday in February at work, accepting a small cupcake from Maggie and a card signed by the other servers. It should have felt lonely. It should have felt sad. Instead, it felt like peace. In April, Mara got accepted into a 4-year university. She'd applied on a whim, not really believing she'd get in, thinking her damaged credit and lack of support would make it impossible. But she'd gotten in. Full scholarship, transfer student, starting in the fall. When she got the acceptance letter, she sat on her couch and cried, not from sadness or stress or exhaustion, but from relief, from the sudden, overwhelming realization that she'd done it. She'd survived. She'd fought back. She'd rebuilt. And she'd won. Not against her family, winning had never been the point, but against the version of herself who would have stayed silent, who would have managed, who would have sacrificed until there was nothing left. That version of herself was gone now. In her place was someone stronger, someone who knew her own worth, someone who understood that being kind didn't mean being available, that being family didn't mean being exploited, that saying no wasn't cruel, it was survival. Mara gave her notice at the diner in May. She'd stay through the summer to save money for her move, but come August she'd be gone. New city, new school, new life. Maggie hugged her tight when she told her, I'm proud of you, hon, you've come a long way. Thank you for everything. You did this yourself. I just gave you a few rides home. Mara smiled. It was one of the first genuine smiles she'd felt in months. On her last day, the other servers threw her a small party in the break room. Grocery store cake, gas station champagne, a card they'd all signed with messages of encouragement. Good luck at school. You're going to do great things. Don't forget about us. Mara wouldn't forget. These people had seen her at her lowest and hadn't judged her, hadn't taken sides, hadn't made her feel small. They'd just shown up. She moved to Lincoln in mid-August. Her apartment was tiny, a studio on the 3rd floor of an old building near campus, but it was hers. She furnished it with second-hand furniture from Goodwill and thrift stores, a desk for studying, a bed that was more comfortable than the couch she'd been sleeping on, kitchen supplies she'd never needed before because she'd always eaten at the diner. She enrolled in classes, sociology, psychology, English composition, all the courses she'd been working toward for 3 years at community college, now continuing at a university that actually felt like progress. On her first day, she walked across campus with her backpack full of new textbooks, breathing in the late summer air. Students everywhere, laughing and talking, rushing to class, living their lives. No one here knew her story. No one knew about Trevor or Denise or the car or the fraud charges. She was just another student. It felt like freedom. Mara's phone rang on a Tuesday in September. She almost didn't recognize the number, but something familiar about it made her answer. Hello. Mara. Her father's voice. Older somehow. Tired. Yes. A long pause. I wanted to call. To see how you were doing. I'm fine. I heard you got into university. That's good. Thank you. Another pause. Mara could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, could imagine him sitting in the living room she'd grown up in, trying to find words for something he didn't know how to say. "Your mother misses you," he finally said. Mara looked out her apartment window at the tree-lined street below. Students walking to class. Cars passing by. Life moving forward. "I'm sure she does," Mara said quietly. "She wants to apologize. To make things right. It's too late for that. She's your mother, Mara. She made mistakes, but she stole from me. For years. That's not a mistake. I know. I know what she did was wrong. But family is complicated. And I think maybe if you could find it in your heart to forgive." "I have forgiven her," Mara interrupted. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean letting her back into my life. It just means I'm not angry anymore." "So that's it? You're just going to cut us off forever?" Mara thought about that question for a long moment. Was that what she was doing? Cutting them off forever? Maybe. Or maybe she was just choosing herself for the first time in her life. "I'm not cutting you off," she said carefully. "I'm just not carrying you anymore. There's a difference." Her father was quiet. Then, softly, "You've changed." "Yes," Mara said. "I have. I don't know if I like it." "You don't have to." He sighed, the sound crackling through the phone line. "Your mother and I, we did our best. We weren't perfect, but we tried." "I know. And I know we made mistakes. But we're still your family." "Family should lift you up," Mara said, remembering Maggie's words from months ago. "Not drag you down." "Is that what you think we did? Dragged you down?" "Yes." The word hung in the air between them. "I'm sorry you feel that way," her father said finally. "I'm sorry too. Will we talk again?" "Maybe. Someday. When I'm ready." "And when will that be?" "I don't know." Her father made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been something sadder. "You always were stubborn. I learned from the best." Another pause. Then, "Take care of yourself, Mara." "You too." The line went dead. Mara set her phone down and went back to her homework. By October, Mara had settled into a new routine. Classes in the morning. Study sessions in the library in the afternoon. A part-time job at a bookstore near campus that paid better than the diner and didn't leave her smelling like grease. She made friends slowly. Other transfer students. People in her classes. A study group that met at the coffee shop on Tuesday nights. They didn't know about her past, and she didn't tell them. Not because she was ashamed, but because it didn't define her anymore. She was just Mara, a student, a reader, someone who worked hard and kept her head down and was building something new. Sometimes, late at night when she couldn't sleep, she'd think about Trevor, about whether he'd learned anything from his probation and community service, about whether he'd grown up at all or if he was still the same person who thought he could take whatever he wanted without consequences. She'd think about Denise, about whether she was still bitter, still playing the victim, still telling anyone who would listen that Mara was the cruel one. She'd think about her father, about his quiet disappointment and his inability to see that enabling Trevor and protecting Denise had damaged Mara just as much as their theft. But these thoughts didn't consume her anymore. They were just echoes of a past she'd survived. In November, Mara got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just her name and her new address written in handwriting she didn't recognize. Inside was a single piece of paper. A short note. "Mara, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know you blocked my number and moved and started over. I don't blame you. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Not because I think it will change anything, but because you deserve to hear it. What I did was wrong. What Mom did was wrong. We used you. We took advantage of you. We treated you like you were supposed to fix our problems without asking for anything in return. I didn't see it at the time. I thought you were just being difficult. But I was wrong. I'm working on myself now. Going to therapy. Trying to figure out why I thought I deserved things I didn't earn. It's hard. Harder than I thought it would be. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to want me in your life. I just wanted you to know that you were right. About everything. I hope you're doing okay. I hope school is good. I hope you're happy. Trevor. Mara read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and put it in her desk drawer. Not to forget. Not to hold on to anger. Just to remember where she'd been and how far she'd come. By December, Kearney felt like a distant memory. Mara went home for winter break, not to her family's house, but to her old apartment, which she'd kept while she figured out what to do with it. She packed up the last of her belongings, cleaned it thoroughly, and left the keys with the landlord. She drove through town one last time, past the diner where she'd worked for 3 years, past the library where she'd studied, past the courthouse where she'd watched Trevor plead guilty and Denise face consequences for the first time in her life. All of it felt like another lifetime. She drove past her parents' house too, slowing down as she passed. The Christmas lights were up, the same ones they'd used every year. Her father's truck was in the driveway. Denise's car was parked on the street. For a moment, Mara thought about stopping, about knocking on the door, about trying one more time to have the conversation she'd wanted her whole life, the one where they saw her as a person, not a resource. But she didn't stop. She kept driving. Some things couldn't be fixed. Some relationships couldn't be salvaged. And that was okay, because she'd learned the most important lesson of all. Being strong didn't mean being available. It meant knowing when to walk away. Mara returned to Lincoln in January. She registered for spring classes, continued working at the bookstore, started volunteering at a women's shelter on weekends, helping other women navigate the legal system when they'd been victims of identity theft or financial abuse. She told her story sometimes. Not all of it, just enough to let them know she understood, that she'd been there too, that they weren't alone. And when they asked her how she'd survived it, she told them the truth. You stop managing everyone else's chaos and start managing your own life. It was that simple and that hard. By spring, Mara rarely thought about her family anymore. They existed somewhere out there in the world. Trevor on probation, Denise on probation, her father probably still enabling both of them, still wondering why his daughter had cut them all out of her life. But they were no longer her responsibility. She'd built something new, something that was entirely hers, a degree she was earning on her own merit, friends who respected her boundaries, a job she enjoyed, an apartment that felt like home, a life that didn't require her to sacrifice herself for other people's comfort. People who heard her story said she was cold. She didn't argue. She just kept moving forward, because in the end, that was what survival looked like. Not dramatic, not vindictive, not cruel, just free. On a warm afternoon in April, Mara sat on a bench outside the university library, textbook open on her lap, sunlight warm on her face. Her phone buzzed, a text from her study group about meeting up later. She responded quickly and set the phone aside. A year ago, she'd been taking the bus to work in the freezing cold, exhausted and hopeless, believing that her life would always be this hard. Now she was here. Different city, different life, different person. She'd finally learned the truth her mother had accidentally taught her. You're stronger. You'll manage. Denise had meant it as a burden, as an excuse to take more and give less. But Mara had turned it into something else. A promise to herself. Yes, she was stronger. Yes, she would manage. But not for them. For herself. And that made all the difference.